everyone. My name is Marylin Montoya. I'm the VP of Marketing at AB Tasty, and welcome today to the digital experimentation model. I will walk you through the concept, what is involved in order to create a digital experimentation organization within your company, what ways you can build up towards having experimentation across different teams and how to collaborate. A bit about AB Tasty before we go forward. So AB Tasty is an experience optimization and feature management company. We are present across the globe. We have 11 offices and more than 225 employees. And to date, we have about 1,000 clients. So what does AB Tasty offer in terms of its product lines? We have our client-side solution and our server-side and feature management solution. Both of them address different teams and have different capabilities, but have the same objective, which is to infuse development and engagement with experimentation. So really testing and learning everything that we do and that we build and personalizing the experience for users, for customers, for anyone who engages with your product, with your website on a daily basis. And so our solutions are prompted onto the same platform. So all the data and the KPIs are on one shared platform. And depending on the organization and depending on which product an organization is using, usually we're dealing with different types of teams, from marketing, which is where we traditionally come from, marketing and e-commerce teams, digital teams, but today much more with product management and also DevOps and release teams and feature management, feature teams if the company is organized into feature teams. So why does AB Tasty exist? How did we get to this point? Why are we talking about the digital experimentation model today? Well, if we take you through this evolution, basically what e-commerce is today is a far cry from what it was in the beginning. E-commerce was really just another channel, sometimes ignored by bigger companies as just another channel, not really active, not too much investment there. And during COVID, as you all know, it gave a tremendous boost towards this channel, and it really helped accelerate the development and the importance of this channel for a lot of different companies. So whereas before it was really just limited to kind of an isolated channel that may or may not have had investment around its development, today is a very, very central part of the identity of a lot of brands. And the reason for that is that customer experience now is highly impacted by the digital experience. So whereas before maybe the brand was investing in different ways to create a relationship with the customer, whether it was in store or through advertising, et cetera, which is still the case. Digital experiences today are taking much more of a prominent role in that part. And so customers are researching, they are interacting with the brand online. And now today, the brand experience online is having a big impact on whether customers choose your services and your products, whether they stay with your services and products, right? And the reason for that, the reason that's changed is because technology has changed. Whereas before we didn't have such scope of technologies and data and ability to understand what customers were doing online. Now with all the technology, with the cloud, with AI, with virtual experiences, it's really changing the way we can interact with customers on digital. And so it's opened the door for a lot of innovation. So today, what's happened is those companies that have spearheaded that innovation. So they have, embraced it, maybe because they were digital native companies or tech companies. They have really exploited these innovations and kind of raised the standard of what customers expect now from brands. So whereas before, it wasn't really visible, now today, a lot of customers are expecting these really top-notch experiences. And so it means that brands that weren't investing in this before have a tremendous amount of pressure today to stay relevant. And to be relevant, you have to really invest in the digital experience and really be there to offer those type of services and ways to interact that the leaders have have rolled out and have, showcased and shared with their customers. So the way that brands ultimately differentiate today is through digital experience. And so that means that it's a huge game changer for existing brands and the way that they manage digital experiences and what they have to do in order to prepare themselves to be able to keep up with the pace of change, which is really, really very exponential. So we've come up with what we call the digital experimentation model. And basically what we're trying to show here is that an organization that is prepared and organized to embed and infuse experimentation into different parts of their activity, but also collaborate on these activities, will be able to drive customer experiences that impact the customer, right? So today, basically the driver of this is data. So whereas before we didn't have the amount of data that we have available today, the ability to centralize, clean, structure, enrich, even predict using data, this can really help us be creative with the ways that we change digital experiences, the way we create campaigns, the way that we show and display a website or a feature or a product or a message, right? And so the issue today, when you're looking at digital experimentation across an organization, is that not all the teams are really structured in a way to be able to act on those insights, right? And be able to implement those things. And there are a lot of reasons for that. There are reasons related to, siloed organization and reporting, different sets of KPIs, lack of visibility and shared roadmaps. So what we're really strongly recommending here is that you align your marketing, product, and tech teams in order to help them do the best of what they can do and really relieve some of that pressure from added tasks and roadmaps that overlap or that can be streamlined in a better way. That may sound a bit abstract, but I'll try to be as concrete as possible in explaining what I mean. So if we look at the experience optimization part here, right, you can see that we're talking about marketing, product, and tech teams. So what does that mean? When we're talking about experience optimization, we're talking about improving what exists. Right? So you have a certain customer journey, you have a certain number of pages, you have a certain way in which people interact and go through your website. And so with data, and thanks to data, we're able to evaluate the way customers and different types of customers interact with your website and what they prefer and where they have some problem points or where you have some drop off on your website where something is broken, right? And so the experience optimization part is really meant to iterate quickly, to be able to gain those insights, understand how to fix something, and then take those learnings back to implement it into something more stable and long-term. So the reason why marketing and product here are a big part is because we believe that this constant iteration should be done in a simple and easy way where you're not necessarily impacting, a more complex roadmap. So for example, maybe you have a website that has a bunch of changes that needs to be made into its hard code, or you have a website that's very difficult to change because of its legacy CMS or because of, the amount of data or the amount of linkages that it might have with other solutions and other tech stacks and other data stacks that you have. So with our client-side solution, what we intend is that it be used by these teams in a way that you can implement a test quickly or correct something quickly, test it, get the insights, and then be able to pass that information to, for example, a tech team that can build that into a longer term roadmap where it can be corrected, within that other product roadmap. And so therefore relieving also some of that pressure of, I have a campaign, I have something that, it's going to be back to school, or it's, it's Black Friday and I need all these, different banners and features to be coded onto the website. The problem with, let's say, a tech team managing that is that this is ephemeral code. So it's code that you're building for a short period of time, then is going to be thrown away. So the question is, why are we engaging our tech teams that can have more of an impact, investing their time and their knowledge and their skill set on long-term projects that will stay and that will contribute to the better experience of the website, instead of working on code that you're going to get rid of in a few weeks, right? Because it's seasonal or because it's temporary. So there are two parts to this, right? First part is being able to identify things that are broken, things that need to be improved, being able to implement them quickly. And by quickly, I mean not touching the code base, being able to put a layer on top of that website and get that insight quickly. At the same time, it's about de-scoping some of those changes or some of those campaigns that we know will be temporary, that will be removed eventually after a couple of weeks, and not adding that to already crowded and very complex development roadmap that a tech team might have, right, internally. So this is a way to kind of mitigate that, to have a common and shared roadmap where those insights are taken back, yet there is a pressure that's removed from that tech team. So there's still a tech component on here, right? Of course, there's still a small part of the experience optimization where there's the tech category. And the reason that's there is that there are certain types of experiments that are better done on server side. And by these types of experiments, I mean those that are really, really complex to manage on a server side, or because they require some very personal information or data, or because they require heavy coding. Some examples of that could be, for example, pricing experiments when you're manipulating maybe hundreds or thousands of pages at a time. It can be, for example, testing delivery and shipping options that are based on geolocation, payment processing options that are different based on region or location or country for that matter. And so these are optimizations that are better done on a server side. And for that, you definitely need to go through a tech team. You cannot do that through a digital team on the e-commerce side. So there are optimizations to be done, within a tech team scope. But the main idea here is when you are working on improving and adapting what's already there, when you're creating your campaigns for your products and your seasons, things that are temporary code, the idea is to structure experimentation in a way that it's the most efficient and can have the most impact. And by the most efficient, it's not just, creating the best variation. It's about being able to exploit the resources that you have internally in the best way and to the best of their skill set, right? And so one of the challenges within organizations today is that there are tremendous bottlenecks to development because there's too much to do. So this is one way to kind of mitigate that constraint. Then if we move on to the second part, which is experience innovation. And here we have mainly product and tech. And what we mean by experience innovation is really creating something new. Not necessarily improving what is already existing, but something really new, really different that you're trying to, wow your customer. And so there is a fine line between what is experience optimization when you take it to an extreme, and when does that become experience innovation. But here, the reason why we've really scoped it under a product and tech is because we're thinking about it from a feature development perspective. So saying, okay, feature development roadmaps need to have experimentation in there to be able to identify their minimal viable product, to see whether it makes sense to continue to invest in XYZ feature, et cetera, and et cetera. So what's also important about experience innovation and why it's different from experience optimization is that it's really meant to anticipate needs, right? So it's based on understanding the customer, understanding their preferences, understanding where the market is evolving to, and really trying to use that data to innovate, right? And to think of new ideas and new ways to connect with the customer. And so a lot of these ideas obviously involve tech and development, and involve roadmaps and feature development roadmaps. So this is why we've clearly, segmented that under the product and tech category. And so the idea is that with these two parts, the experience optimization and the experience innovation together, they make up a very functional digital experimentation model within an organization where there's a shared and common roadmap, where there is de-scoping and scoping, where teams are enabled, but they have visibility across the board, and they're able to move at the pace of change, right? Because everything is based on data. And as they're collecting data, as they're understanding their customers' behavior better, they're able to continue to change and optimize their websites and innovate on their websites and their applications. Right, so this is what we call the digital experimentation model, and we believe that customers who are able to implement this, even if it's just one part of it, and that usually is the case, that a customer will evolve to one part of this model, and then as they get more mature, they start incorporating the other parts. And it's very logical. We see it a lot in our customers today, where they started off with a very basic functioning, a very limited scope of experimentation, and today have completely rolled it out across the organization with a center of excellence and different teams who use different products, but all understand the experimentation roadmap. And, really quickly, on this slide, basically what we're saying here is that we believe that an organization, and this goes back to what I was saying about, empowering your teams to use the best of their skill set, is that in order to keep up with the pace of change, those scopes of work need to be really allocated properly, right? And so an organization that is mature will have both. Will have long-term innovation, long-term roadmaps, teams that are focusing on driving more value through new experiences, and also low-tech options where you have teams that are, being able to implement their ideas quickly for today, right? So being able to build a campaign for, the following month or for the following season, and being able to do that autonomously, of course, with a collaboration with other teams, but being able to do that without too much constraint, and not have a big impact on a long-term roadmap. So what's the North Star for companies scaling an experimentation program? Well, it depends on where you are in terms of your data collection practices. It depends on your team and your internal resources. There is, as I was saying earlier, an evolution for our customers. Some customers start with just very basic, data, collecting data from their website, and running experiments from there. And then we have customers that evolve a bit more. They start using a lot of our partner ecosystem tools, such as digital analytics and CDPs. And so they evolve to a place where they're able to analyze the data and really understand the different customer segments, be able to aggregate data that's coming from different sources, right? Not just necessarily online, but also in store, for example. And then being able to identify those customers through different strategies on their assets, and then being able to, create custom experiences, adapting what they see, how they see it. And so for us, we really believe in that crawl, walk, run, right? I mean, I think it's very logical to start very basic if you haven't started. And eventually, as you grow, as your data collection becomes more sophisticated, as you start investing in the analytics and the insights that are going to help you create your experimentation roadmap, then you can become more mature and be able to spread that activity throughout your organization. So when it comes to the organizational part, it really comes down to these three different bricks. First, proof of concept. A lot of our customers that started at the beginning, that's how they launched the activity. They started with a small group, maybe in one region, or for one project, for one website or sub website, and then they scaled that after. And so once the functioning and the way of collaborating and the way of being able to get better at determining an experiment roadmap, you can then start collaborating and scaling and presenting that across the different business units and explaining the impact of it. And then once you get to the third part, really the organizational growth part, that's really when you're talking about, company-wide organizational alignment. Different teams are very interested in being able to run their own experiments. How can we, enable them to do so and be autonomous, but collaborate, right? And so that's the ultimate objective, is to get to that point. There are different ways to get to that point, and actually there are different models that we can imagine for companies, and not all of them will necessarily get to the same type of functioning. It really depends on the way that they operate internally, how many different regions they operate in, what level of complexity they have internally, of course, right? But we've identified pretty much 3 different models that work for different organizations based on where they are and the level of development that they have within an experimentation program. So I'll go through some of these case studies really quickly. The first one is Hannah Anderson. So this is one of our customers in the US. Hannah Anderson has a centralized organization. What that means is basically all the experimentation is centralized in one business unit, and then it's then shared across those different other units that are attached to that one central unit. The reason for that is because they are very keen on being able to collect all the insights and have like one global visibility as to what they're doing. And also it's a way for them to really control the brand image. To be able to make sure that all the experiments that are being done are within a certain type of brand guidelines and so forth. The only problem with this organization is that it does create bottlenecks a lot of the time, because of course everything has to get approved through that central team. But a lot of companies do have that type of functioning, where all the experimentation is pretty much handled centrally, and it's just adopted or relayed to that local region. Here's another one, which is decentralized. Now, this is a very interesting model. Frete uses this type of organization. It means that with this type of setup, different teams are kind of functioning independently. Now, it's very, very empowering for the reason you can imagine that every team is kind of doing their own thing. They're being very autonomous. They're being able to implement things when they need, how they need them, based on local data, regional data that impacts their local market. So it makes a lot of sense from that point of view. It adds a tremendous amount of agility. The downside, of course, is that you have the risk of having changes or experiments or messaging that is not necessarily aligned with one brand identity, right? So it means that there can be quite a bit of flexibility. However, flexibility maybe in not the best way. But I think that this can be counteracted if, for example, the regional teams are very briefed on their brand guidelines. They're very have a very solid understanding of what that is, what they can and can't do, so on and so forth. So it is an interesting way to work. We have customers that work this way, and it worked, and it's very successful for them. They're able to carry out many experiments, and they're able to adapt it to the local need, which is why it's very interesting for this particular customer. And then the third one is what we call the kind of the hybrid model. So the difference between this one and Hannah Anderson is that there is an exchange between the central and the local, and it's more about getting approval, but the experiments are designed at the regional level, right? So what's interesting here is that for Clarence particularly, they have about more than 28 regions, working on experimentation and running experimentation roadmaps on their websites. And so what's interesting here is that there is a level of control on the brand. There is a level of standardization in terms of the brand experience that they want to make sure to implement on the different websites in the different regions. But it allows each of the regions to be creative and to think of new ways to engage with their customers, and it allows them to adapt the messaging and the content of these experiments to their local audience. The other reason why it's very interesting and very efficient is because in the case of Clarence, for example, they share internally through the Center of Excellence all the different ideas and experiments that are being run by the different regions. And a lot of the times regions will take an idea from another region and adapt it to their own region. So they are duplicating, copying experiments, adapting them to the local language, to the local market, and being able to really scale experimentation, which is what we ultimately want to do, be able to identify those great ideas, be able to implement them and test them in those different regions, right? So it really creates a bank of experimentation ideas coming from different regions, and you can test the ones that are as successful, or you can see the ones that didn't work and avoid making the same mistakes, or avoid experiments that didn't have that much of an impact on your bottom line. So very, very interesting setup. It's a type of organization that we highly recommend once you get to a more mature level of functioning. But then again, it really depends on how you operate internally. For Clarence, it works really well because of the way that they're structured. Now, what are the challenges to scale? So we've gone through, internal organization. We've gone through the idea of the digital experimentation model and how these different teams collaborate and what they do, what their scopes are. But there's still challenges to this. This isn't an easy thing necessarily to implement in a company. Some of those challenges, and I think, I've kind of alluded to them before, are really around, these really, really heavy, intense product roadmaps and development cycles, right? And because a lot of the digital teams today are very much limited and bottlenecked for that matter on anything they can execute, because of these, hefty roadmaps. A lot of the time they will have to outsource, a lot of this development. They still may do that even with an experimentation program. So that does add a lot of complexity to the initiative. Of course, I was talking about scoping and descoping. One of the reasons why tech teams, get bogged down, and why delivery is delayed, and why we have, late roadmaps or very long roadmaps, is because often in an organization you have a lot of what we call scope creep. And I think my colleague Aaron for explaining that term to me. But scope creep is basically, a tech team will have their roadmap, and they will have all these other different side need projects that are added onto that roadmap because they're somehow impacted by that roadmap. And so what ends up happening is that the roadmap that you initially planned out, that was maybe, I don't know, a few weeks, a few months, is all of a sudden more than a year, right? And that's because there were needs that were not necessarily considered, were not necessarily understood as to who would address them, or how you could descope them or allocate them to a different team. And so that means that you end up having these new, requirements added to your roadmap. So that makes it so an organization is very slow at being able to implement the changes that they need to. And then the third part is really the data complexity. So, we were talking about innovation earlier and how we have access to data and AI. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier, right? It's a lot more complex. There's a lot more data processing and structuring. There's also privacy issues to manage, right? And so the data element becomes more and more complex. So a lot of companies are investing in CDPs, investing in being able to structure their data, being able to collect data, right? First-party data from their customers, in order to have a better, clear vision of each of their customers. And so the data part, in-store, online, web and app, all of that, retailer, third-party retailer, all of that needs to be, aggregated, cleaned, and structured in order to really make it actionable. And that isn't necessarily an easy challenge. And then, as we were talking about earlier, the different teams today, they are in this kind of siloed approach, right? They are, they don't necessarily collaborate. And so these are some obstacles to implementing a digital experimentation model across an organization and getting to that full organizational test and learn strategy. But again, we emphasize the fact that you have to crawl before you walk and before you run. So these types of strategies, once they're implemented and they're implemented correctly, even within a small scope, are contagious in a good way, meaning that you start being more efficient, you start driving insights, you start seeing impact, and other teams become interested in it, and they also want to collaborate, and they want to be able to run experimentation within their own organization, their own teams as well, because they also want to be efficient and they also want to make sure that they're spending their time correctly. So it is a crawl, walk, and run strategy. And bit by bit, going from one team to the next, being able to share visibility, share insights, you slowly start breaking down these silos and having shared KPIs on many different projects. So a quick view on, from a feature perspective, how we do that, how we attempt to do that for our customers with our two solutions, right? With our client side and our server side API-based experimentation solution. Basically, we are enabling these different teams to have work from the same unified data source, right? The ability to integrate data sources from your CDPs or analytics tools, allowing different teams to work with different interfaces and different solutions based on their skill set, their coding level, the resources they have available. So running tests either on the client side or running tests on the server side, being able to personalize on the client side, being able to personalize on the server side, being able to put patches and fixes when you have broken parts of your website on client side, being able to roll back on releases when there are bugs and broken parts of the website, having that common KPI reporting for all these different teams so that they understand the impact of what they're doing. What's very particular about our solutions is that we want to make sure that there are business KPIs tied to all the activities. So last thing before we move on, before we close this session, I invite you all to please check out the Digital Experimentation Model site. You can access it from our website, or you can scan that QR code or type in that URL and you can access it directly. It's broken up into several parts that explore and go into detail on the digital experimentation model. We have case studies in there. We have quotes from different seasoned experts in experimentation. So I highly recommend that you check it out if you're interested in learning more about the digital experimentation model. Thanks again for your time today. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name is Marylin Montoya. If not, contact us on our website or visit our LinkedIn page. Thank you. Bye.